Hello, everyone, and welcome to our January Heritage Live. Today's presentation is BC's Black History on the Map. This is tied to our new online exhibit. We've been here all along uncovering BC's Black history, which is now live on our website, coquitlamheritage.ca, so please go check that out as well after the presentation. My name is Abby Lise, and I'm the Operations Coordinator for Coquitlam Heritage. We'll be doing a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So if you're joining us on the Zoom webinar, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen where you can type in your questions. I will also be monitoring the Facebook Live, so if you have any questions, you can just type them in as a comment, and when Tam's has finished her presentation, we will answer any questions that you have. Feel free to ask a question during any part of the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to send this over to Tanis.
Hello, and welcome to a Heritage Live for Coquitlam Heritage. We're doing this as a preliminary, sort of just to pique your interest in the new exhibit that we're going to have online. Abby was close, but not entirely correct. The exhibit is not online today. It's scheduled to be online later today. So at the very worst, it'll be online February 1st, Monday, just in time for Black History Month. So as we said, the exhibit is going to be called We've Been Here All Along, and it will be about the Black settlers to BC and some of the Black communities here now. In addition to the online exhibit, we're also going to be putting out a coloring and activity book for teachers. It will be available on our website as a digital download, a PDF file. And we'll have limited numbers of hard copies available as well. So if you're a teacher or a homeschooler, you may be interested in checking that out. The work in the workbook was done by Ejiwa Ebenebe. She's a local artist. She's also known as Edge. So you can find out more about her at theartofedge.com or on her Instagram at artofedge. So for this presentation, we're not going to give away all the details that are on the online exhibit because we want you to go and look at it yourselves. But we're going to talk about the BC map and significant places on the map that apply to Black history in the province. So we're going to start out with a picture of the map showing Victoria on Vancouver Island. And you'll also see red dots there that represent the city of Nanaimo and Saanich as well. This part of the province was really significant to the largest Black population that came here at any one time. And they came here as a result of politics, really. So in 1858, the governor of British Columbia, which was then known as New Caledonia, was Governor Sir James Douglas, who himself, incidentally, was a half Black man whose mother was from, I believe it was Guyana. She was from Guyana, and his father was white. At that time, he was the HBC Hudson's Bay Company factor, but he then became the governor of the province. And that coincided with the 1958 gold rush on the Fraser River. This led to an influx of Americans, which panicked the British government, and they thought that they might stand to lose the colony. And one of the things that Governor Douglas came up with doing was to offer some really good things to some of the Black population that currently lived in California. So he contacted a boat captain. His name was Jeremiah Nagel, and he sent him down to the Pioneer Committee, which was formed in 1852 in San Francisco at the First African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. What he offered them was things that they couldn't get in California. He offered them the chance to purchase land. He offered the right for landholders to vote. He offered the right to sit on juries, right to protection from the law. And after 7 years, they could become British citizens. So that stood to increase the British presence and his support in the province when all the Americans were coming in for the gold rush. So here on this page, we have a picture of some of the notable citizens. Mifflin Wister Gibbs was one of the first people to come on the Commodore ship, also pictured there. He was in partnership with Peter Lester, but I'm not going to give away all that information. But they were two of the principal settlers that came to Victoria with the first influx of about 400 Black people from California in 1858. So that's why we have Victoria, Nanaimo, and Saanich on the map, because a lot of those people moved out of Victoria to outlying areas. And in particular, to the next slide, several people moved to Salt Spring Island, which is pictured here. You can see on the left is Vancouver Island, and on the right is the mainland. And on Salt Spring Island, there was a family called the Estes family. They, Sylvia Stark, sorry, it was the Stark family. Sylvia Estes married into the Stark family. The Estes were from Missouri, and you can find out more about their emancipation from slavery on our website exhibit. The family was freed in 1852 when Sylvia was only 12 years old. Then they all moved out to California at the 1849 gold rush, the 49ers. When Sylvia was 12, her family was freed. Sylvia married Louis Stark, which was her father's partner. From there, they joined the Pioneer Committee and the group that came on the Commodore ship and came to Victoria, and the Starks and Estes moved out to Salt Spring Islands, the Salt Spring Island. And there they carved out a place to live in the wilderness. And then, so here we have the pictures of Sylvia Stark when she was quite an old lady living on Salt Spring Island still. And the man on the left with the dog is her son, Willis Stark, who was known as the Panther. Apparently, he developed a great skill at hunting the panthers on the island. Not really panthers, they were mountain lions or cougars, but that's what they called them at the time. I imagine that's likely a holdover from where they grew up in the States. So Willis Stark, AKA the Panther, is shown there, and his mother, Sylvia Stark. So that's why we have Salt Spring Island on the map. And the next one we have is Giscombe Portage and Rapids. So the Giscombe Portage and Rapids is up near Prince George. I think you can see that on the left. So that's fairly far north from here. And up there, there are two landmarks, Giscombe Portage and Giscombe Rapids. Those are named after John Giscombe, who was a man who came from Jamaica. He also came with the 1858 pioneers, and he prospected for gold in the northern part of the province. He and his Bahamian partner, Henry McDame, were known for a trek that they made through the wilderness. They were traveling up to Fort Macleod. And when they finally got there, they were greeted by a 30-gun salute for being the first non-native people to travel an alternate route to the fort. So it opened up some new territory for people to travel. Giscombe was also known for a firsthand account he gave of the Rennie Party tragedy. The Rennie Party were a group from London, Ontario, who came to a tragic end in gold country of the Caribou. John Giscombe agreed to search for the men, and he discovered their remains, and he pieced together the story of violence and cannibalism and reported it to Fort Macleod. John Giscombe was so successful in his prospecting that he died a very wealthy man, and on our web exhibit, you can learn a little bit more about John Giscombe. So in the pictures we have here, we have a picture of Giscombe Rapids with a boat in the water, and the picture of the sawmill on the right is not an older one. It's from a later time. We don't have any pictures of John Giscombe. Someone painted a picture of him, but it was a speculative portrait. We don't know exactly what he looked like. The next place we have on the map is McDame Creek. McDame Creek is north near the Stikine River, so it's quite far north. And it's also near a place called Dease Lake. McDame Creek was named for Henry McDame. He was the man I just mentioned earlier, who was a partner of John Giscombe. So this creek here, McDame Creek, was the site of the Discovery Company that were gold mining, and it was formed by these two men in the early 1870s. Within about 30 days of working their claim, they had extracted $6,000 worth of gold, which is approximately $250,000 today. The miners at McDame Creek also found, it wasn't John and Henry who found it, but other miners at the McDame Creek found a gold nugget that weighed 72 ounces. It's the largest that has ever been found in BC's history. Sadly, unlike his partner, Henry McDame did not retain his wealth. We also have, and so we have pictures here of What do we have pictures of, Maggie? We have pictures of the map, and you can see the Clore River there and the location of Mount Clore. And while I'm talking about Mount Clore, I will also mention Dease Island. We had intended to put in a picture of Dease Island, but we got mixed up because there's Dease River and then there's also Dease Island. So I don't have a picture of Dease Island. Dease Island is in the Fraser River, very close to Coquitlam. And in Dease Island is where a man named Henry Dease, it's named for him, started his own salmon cannery factory. So he was a tinsmith by trade, and when he came here, he put his skills to work to become a very successful salmon canner. So we don't have a picture or a map of Dease Island, but it's not hard to find if you just look it up. And we were going to show you a plaque of the John Sullivan Dease on the island, but we don't have it. I'm sorry. And Mount Clore and Clore River are named after another Black man who came to Canada. His name was Arthur Clore. He was born in Virginia in 1887. His father served in a Black regiment during the American Civil War. Arthur traveled to the north of BC to work claims in the various locations. He spent time in Alaska, and as late as 1939, he was still listed as a prospector and farmer. Where did I have that? So he spent a fair bit of time in the area around Kitsilus and in the town itself. So here we have two pictures. One is the picture of Kitsilus Main Street, which would have been a very familiar sight to Arthur Clore. And at that time on the rivers, steamboats were a big deal. They were traveling up and down, supplying people with the goods that they needed. So there's a picture of steamboats on the Clore River named after Arthur Clore. The next thing we have on the map is a fairly well-known place. A lot of people have heard of Barkerville. We traveled up to Barkerville a couple of summers ago and looked at the town site that's now a historic park. But unknown to a lot of people, this place was home to many Black pioneers, a lot of them that came with the 1858 group. Aside from prospectors, though, there were quite a number of other pioneers. Among them was Painless Jones. Dad, if you happen to be listening, you might want to take note of Painless Jones, who was a dentist. His real name was William Allen Jones. He was a brother of John Craven Jones, who was the first school teacher on Salt Spring Island, which we mentioned earlier. And he had another brother who was a prospector. You can find out more about them on the exhibit. There was also a laundress named Rebecca Gibbs who lived there. She may or may not have been related to Mifflin Wister Gibbs, the Victoria pioneer who was so successful through marriage. She may have been related, but we don't know that for sure. So we have some pictures here of two views. The left view of Barkerville was from, the date here somewhere, 1930. And the right view was taken in 2012. And then if you go to Barkerville, you can look inside one of the buildings and you'll see a little diorama as pictured there of Painless Jones going about his daily business. There are no pliers in that picture, Dad, I'll note. The next thing we have noted on the map are some Harry Jerome landmarks. These three locations that we have two pictures, but there are three locations, are for a statue to Harry Jerome on the left that is located in Stanley Park. And on the right, there's a picture of the Barnett Highway, and there's a white blob you can see there, and that is a large dome, and that's the Harry Jerome Sports Center. Harry Jerome, if you've not heard of him, came to BC from Saskatchewan in the 1950s. And not only was Harry an Olympic athlete representing Canada in the 1960s, 64, and 68 Olympics as part of the track team, but his grandfather and his sister were also Olympic athletes. His grandfather, John Howard, competed in 1912, and his sister Valerie in 1960. Interestingly, his grandfather, John Howard, also worked as a train porter in the United States, which is another topic, the train porters, that we will explore in our online exhibit, so you can find out some more about that. So the images that we have here to show you is the statue of Harry Jerome in Stanley Park. Thank you, Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Miggy. In the middle is a picture that is normally hung up in the large dome that you can see to the right, the Harry Jerome Sports Center. I went to investigate, and they had temporarily taken the picture of Harry Jerome down because someone had, as the guy in the dome said, and I quote, smoked it with a volleyball, so it's got a crack across the glass that they're going to repair. So those things are to commemorate Harry Jerome, and there's also a Harry Jerome Community Recreation Center on 23rd Street in North Vancouver. So he is definitely on the map. The next thing we have is an overview of the streets that compose the Hogan's Alley and Old Strathcona area in Vancouver. This is an area in Vancouver that was a home to a thriving Black community, beginning around the 1900s and ending with the construction of a highway overpass known as the Georgia Viaduct. Hogan's Alley was the unofficial name for the street, which was Park Lane, or it was more like an alley between streets. Residents of this area came from Black communities in Alberta, who had come prior to that from Oklahoma, families who came with the pioneers of 1858, and families of railway porters. You can find out why a lot of the railway porters settled there if you take a look at our online exhibit. I'm giving you all these little tips that can intrigue you. The general neighborhood ran between Union and Pryor Streets, if you're familiar with that part of the city, and from Main Street to Jackson Avenue in the other direction. So you can find out about the history behind the name Hogan's Alley and about some of the notable residents of that neighborhood when you look at our exhibit. So here we have pictured a view of Hogan's Alley from 1958. But there are a lot of prosperous people living in the area with nice houses, lots of businesses going on, and then things went sour for them. So next we have on the map, this is where Dease Island was going to be, but we've skipped that. The next thing we have is Joe Forte's Fountain. So that little red dot is the location near English Bay where there is a commemorative fountain to Joe Seraphim Fortes. He's commemorated by this fountain, which is an apt location because he spent a lot of time in the English Bay area. Joe Fortes was born in Trinidad in 1863, and he arrived in Vancouver in 1884. It's interesting to me, some of the routes that these people took to come to Canada. At that time, there was no Panama Canal. Boats had to go all the way around, or they had to take a train across the Isthmus of Panama. And traveling by boat, it was quite an arduous thing to travel in those days, and they must have seen a lot of territory that many other people never did. Anyway, once Joe arrived in Vancouver in 1884, he spent the rest of his life in the area. He was a lifeguard, a volunteer lifeguard at English Bay Beach in the summers, where he lived in a tent. And he also had a home in English Bay where he lived when it wasn't swimming season. He died in 1922, and his gravestone, I'm told, is at Mountain View Cemetery and reads only Joe. He was a well-known figure in the area. You can find out some more about Joe in the exhibit as well. So there you can see a picture of the Joe Fortes Fountain, and beside it, a picture of Joe Seraphim Fortes himself. Next we have, on the map, the Militant Mothers of Ramier Overpass. So the green that you can see that runs horizontally across the picture is an overpass that goes across the railway tracks. This is a landmark in downtown Vancouver that marks a significant achievement by some of the Black women who petitioned the city to build this overpass for the safety of their children. In order to get to their school, Admiral Seymour Elementary School, these children had to cross across the railway tracks. And at that time, it was a place where there was a lot of stopping and starting and maybe shunting of the trains. And it was a pretty dangerous environment for over the 400 children that crossed to and fro from school. So the women of the, it was a poorer housing project that they lived in. And the women petitioned the city to do something about the dangerous situation for the students. And when it became clear that their concerns were not a priority, a number of the mothers from the neighborhood formed a group called the Militant Mothers of Raymure, and they set up a blockade on the railway tracks, and they sat there until something was done about it. Some of the mothers from the neighborhood included the sister of Harry Jerome, as well as some of the names that were there were Judith Stainsby, Carolyn Jerome, which I just mentioned, Alice Hamilton, who is actually the mother of Jamie Lee Hamilton, who was the first transgender person to openly run for Canadian political office. Jean Amos, Tony Cowlishaw, Ollie Strauman, Barbara Burnett, Joan Morelli, Sheila Turgeon, Muggs Sigurgesson, Babs Kane, Dorothy Cox, and Lisa Atva, who was a teenager at the time, and there were others as well. So they sat there, they blocked the train, and they forced the city to solve the problem. So to this day, you can go and walk across the Militant Mothers Overpass, which is located right by, where's my address here? The Militant Mothers Overpass is right by Raymure and Strathcona Street. So I went over there to take a look, and on the sidewalk near it, there's also a mosaic that you can see there that commemorates the women blocking the train. That's on the sidewalk. There's a sign telling you when you're there, you can walk across it. And there's also a plaque about the ladies on the other side from the one that's shown here. I was lucky. It didn't rain the day I needed to take the picture. So the next thing, so that was in the 1970s. No, that's Harry Jerome. I'm going to get my notes straight here. It was in the, I believe the 70s. I don't have the date here, but I think it was early 70s, possibly 60s. So now we'll move to the next landmark, which is Henry Houston Scott Park. So that little red dot shows you the location of the park. And if you cross the street, there's also a plaque to the Henry Houston Scott family. And there's also, I'll tell you that after. So this park is significant in Black history because the Henry Houston Scott and his family came to British Columbia via Texas. They were a Black family. They homesteaded in Oklahoma, and then they came up here and settled in what is now Surrey. Henry was a shoemaker by trade, and the family farmed in the location shown here on the map. If you go to the park, which you can see in this next slide, the park is still there, and the trees that are on the little corner lot are original orchard trees that the family had in their orchard. There's a picture of the plaque that you can see when you're over there, and the Scott family tombstone. The Scott family tombstone is a new addition. It was put up by the Surrey Historical Society in 2018. For 84 years, the graves of the family were unmarked. Our exhibit will tell you more about this family that helped settle the area, and they contributed to road improvements, among other things. Now we have, closer to home in Coquitlam, Percy Perry Stadium. So the red dot shows the location of Percy Perry Stadium. Formerly known as Town Center Stadium, this location was renamed Percy Perry Stadium in 2006, 1 year after well-known coach Percy Perry died. Percy Perry came from Trinidad, and a lot of the Black people in the Coquitlam area in the late 60s, early 70s did come from the West Indies. Percy was a coach. He coached his children as well as numerous sports teams, notably the Coquitlam Cheetahs. And his daughter, Tara Perry, who goes by her married name now, Tara Self, was an Olympic athlete, and she's followed in her father's footsteps, coaching the Cheetahs. In the coming year, we'll be featuring the Perrys as part of our exhibit about Coquitlam's Black community. So in the next slide, you can see some pictures, or a picture of Percy Perry Stadium. So he was on the map. And the next one is even closer to our museum. It's the Church of God in Christ. And this is located in Millardville. And it was a church that was founded by a Black man in 1978. His name was Reverend James Blackwell. He was a member of the All Nations Church of God in Christ that was based in Memphis, Tennessee. The church still operates, although it now operates under the name Church of God in Christ, I believe. It's at the corner of Allard Street and Harris Avenue here in Coquitlam, so it's not far. It's just a short walk from us here at the museum. So you can look at the pictures of the building so that if you drive by, you'll happen to see it. That was founded by a Black man here in Coquitlam. So that's our brief tour of the map. I'm sure there's probably other areas that can be pinpointed, and we are happy to hear from anybody that can tell us about anything that they know that we haven't covered here. If any of these images have piqued your interest, you'll find more about some of them on our online exhibit. Some of the information will be forthcoming for the second installment of the exhibit, which will feature the Black communities of just Coquitlam. That will be coming up in the fall of 2021. So if you're bored during these COVID times and you want to take a little road trip, you can get your car and drive around to some of these points and see these items for yourself. And as I mentioned, this exhibit about just Coquitlam coming in 2021, contact me if you'd like to contribute to our next exhibit about Coquitlam's Black history. The more informed we are, the better off we all are. And I'd be happy to hear from anyone that can add to our knowledge of the Black communities. And that's all I got for you today. If anyone has any questions, I will attempt to answer them.
It doesn't appear that we have any questions.
I guess I was thorough then.
You're very thorough.
Well, thanks for joining us here for this Heritage Live. And the next one will be at the end of February, and it will be about love, appropriately for February.